Yo, yo, yo. Welcome to the Rain City podcast. I'm your host, Tyler, and welcome to a place where we talk about faith and how it intersects with the journey of life, and where we help you navigate life's secular paths with a little holy pizzazz. In today's episode, we'll be talking about miracles. Do they exist? Are they real? And if they are, how often do they happen? Do you know what a miracle looks like? And should we be praying for healing and things of that nature? So that's the topic of today's episode. And with that, I'll introduce today's special guest. We have Mr. Holy Money, one of the world's most jacked pastors, and he puts the reverence in reverend. They used to call him the Korean Babe Ruth. Welcome back, Steve.
Good to be back. I'm not sure if I'm the most jacked pastor. There's plenty out there.
You would definitely compete in the most jacked pastors games.
I'm sure there's lots of Americans out there. Nothing against Canadians, but there's some jacked. Yeah. Anyways.
Okay, miracles. So why don't you kick us off, Steve? You've been reading a lot of books on miracles, so I'm curious to know what's percolating.
Yeah, I have so much stuff. I don't know. I'm probably it's too much to share on a Sunday, so I thought it'd be good to share here. I've been reading this book by Miracles, the Credibility of the New Testament Accounts by Dr. Craig S. Keener, I think. Craig S. Keener, and he's a professor, tenure professor at Asbury Seminary, and he's written, very credible. He's won awards for his Bible commentary on the New Testament, the IBP Bible background commentary. He also wrote a commentary on Acts, thing like that's. And then he wrote on Paul, Women and Wives of Theology, and wrote another commentary on Revelation. I think that also won an award. Commentary on John, Matthew. Wow. So many books. He's just very reputable.
And how did you come across this book? Like, how did you find it?
Well, I have a Pro D fund from my university, so I have to use about $330 of it.
Oh, I see.
Before the end of this month, and then I was actually waiting for the iPad, but it didn't drop, so I have to use it before May. And I looked at my Logos Bible program. So I have a Logos Bible program. So that's basically my library. All my books are stored away or given away.
Oh wow!
But most of my material and content is in like this Bible program. Mm-hmm. So I have I think right now $3,000 worth of material there. But
oh my gosh.
And then I thought, okay, I'm going to buy another one. And then there's like these sales going on. Every month there's a sale. And then this dropped. Miracles, the Credibility of the New Testament Accounts, 2-volume set. I'm not sure if this dropped first, but then I also saw a YouTube feed with Josh McDowell's son. I forgot his name. You can look it up. And then he was doing he has a podcast. He's also a professor at Biola. Mm-hmm. So he came on, and then I bought the book, and then basically it's like 1,100 pages of, I think about 200 pages is philosophical debate against enlightenment and like a closed world system where nothing supernatural invades.
Oh.
Yeah, so...
But he's a Christian?
No, he's arguing against that for the first
I see.
couple hundred pages. 100 pages, and then he goes through a biblical account of like why miracles are really the main message of Jesus, the kingdom of God. There's a lot of people think the message of Jesus is like he's love or he's kindness, or but the message of Jesus is very clear in the Gospels. It's the kingdom of God invading the kingdom of darkness, and and the ravages of sin in our world, sickness, especially sickness and demonic oppression, deliverance. So that's why Jesus says, go cast out devils, heal the sick, and raise the dead, because these are all evidence of the kingdom invading this earth. These are like signs and wonders to give us a foretaste of what's to come. So he goes and lays that out. I think he says like about 30 to 40% of Mark is all miracles.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's not like an obscure event. Jesus emphasized miracles, and he goes out demonstrating his kingdom power. And you know that Mark is kind of like the blueprint for a lot of the other gospels. So you can see in Mark, like he gets right to the point of the message of Jesus. So he writes that, and then he goes and writes about all these. These are like academics, right? So they're gonna go try to verify all this stuff. And I think what got him was when his wife is from the Congo, and then she was telling him a story. She was telling him the account of his sister, who literally died as a baby. And the mother had no access to a hospital, so she literally walked to a village where there was a church or a city or whatever.
Oh my gosh.
That was 3 hours. So she was brain dead for 3 hours.
Like with the baby in the
Yeah,
belly?
she just carried the baby. She's dead.
Oh my gosh.
She just carried the baby for 3 hours. Now, this is his sister-in-law. So the mother took her to a church, and the pastor prayed for her and came back to life.
Whoa.
Now she has a master's degree from Ivy League and works in the United States.
Wow.
So these are not like hokey people. But when you read the book, he's always like very careful to say, this is not eyewitness accounts. This is like a testimonial. But he goes on to like talk about the amount of testimonies in the world that's been collected, and he talks about hundreds of millions. So when we talk about miracles, sometimes we think it's like one in a blue moon or something. And then he talks about the prevalence of it. It's like way more prevalent than you think, especially in Asia or like South America and Africa. It's just basically how Christianity is done there. And whether you're going to a local church or Presbyterian church or charismatic church or Pentecostal church, they all believe in miracles. Literally, you can't have church there without believing in miracles. And even academic professors, theologians from Africa, South America, they all believe in miracles. It's not like something that is they have to put faith in. They already have faith. That makes sense. So that's why I've been getting interested in it. I've just been reading a lot of testimonies. And then I just watched another testimony from this guy named Joshua Brown, Dr. Joshua Brown. He's a neuroscientist and a researcher. He's the director of Global Medical Research Institute in the Indiana University, which applies rigorous methods of evidence-based medicine to study Christian spiritual healing practices. I actually think that this guy came with me to Brazil because he was from Indiana University. He was doing his doctorate, and I think it was this guy because he came and he literally tested people's auditory hearing. He had a machine.
Oh, wow.
So he was like going around testing if you were deaf. So pre-prayer and post-prayer. And so he gives evidence of people who actually went from like they're deaf because they can only hear 90 decibels and above, and then they will go down to 40 and 50, which means they're basically not deaf.
Wow.
Yeah. So those were at our meetings in Brazil. I didn't know that he was measuring that, but he also suffered. The reason he got into it because like 8 years ago he had a brain tumor, and he was inoperable, non-surgical, no hope, no chemo, no radiation. They said just basically, yeah, you're on your own.
Wow.
So he said he was really upset, and his wife just had a baby. He was in his 30s.
Wow.
So he was just like tormented because he said, what I would give just to not be free of this thought, like, I'm going to die any minute. So he said, it's just me and God. So he just started researching about miracles, and he went everywhere in America and some places around the world for a year, just got prayer.
Wow.
And then there were times he said we got prayer, and then his body felt like he was getting electrocuted. So long story short, he came back after a year because he does MRIs constantly. He said after a year, he said his brain tumor basically became like scar tissue.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and then it stopped growing. So he didn't have,
That's crazy.
he had no hope. But now he's been alive for 8 years, and he's doing research. You can see him on YouTube. That was last year, giving interviews. He just still goes to Africa, does research. He's writing publications, writing papers.
That reminds me of this guy that I saw on TikTok who has cancer. I don't remember what type, but he was running every single day and posting a video trying to raise awareness. I don't really know where he is, but he was like, I have 1 year left to live, so I just want to spend it, raising awareness and letting people know and going around the world, just living life and embracing it, not wanting to spend it in a hospital bed. But yeah, I think it's crazy to hear things like that, because although it's not like in your how to say this, like if you, for example, said you had cancer, I'd be like, sorry to hear, Steve. But then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I don't have cancer anymore. I'm like, oh, that's great news. But then it's kind of hard for a person to really like understand the gravity of you suffering something that you can't get rid of. And so what do you think either needs to happen or is something that people are missing when it comes to these miracles? Because these are amazing stories, but I feel like North American culture is so desensitized to, these crazy things happen. It's like, oh, okay, that's cool. And then they move on.
Well, I think it's the frequency of it. Is people think it's like you have to go to some kind of, it's kind of like a pilgrimage or something. But I think this guy went to places where they believed in miracles all over America. So it's like your belief that it does obviously not everyone gets healed, but it's probably like way more than you think. Because thinking about the level of testimonies that he just couldn't even like write down every single testimony. That's why his book is so big.
Wow.
So if you look at, I have this chart here. I don't know if I should have gave it to you before, but so he says there's people just can't simply dismiss hundreds of millions of miracle claims. So we're talking about hundreds of millions. So in one U.S. study, 86% of charismatics involved with just the Catholic charismatic church, Catholics who are charismatic or believe in healing, 86% of them experienced healing.
86% of Catholics?
Catholics who believe in healing. So that's a category. They're called charismatic Catholics. So
CC.
Yeah, they believe that God can heal this, like most Catholics do, but these people are like actively going for it. So a lot of them are in Latin America. 86% of them who go to church testify about a healing. Do you know what I'm saying? That's a crazy number.
Yeah.
So I think when you look at these stats, okay, for example, I'll give you an example here. In Kenya, there are 33 Pentecostals and 23 are charismatics. Basically, people who used to be Pentecostals but more like not hardcore. So I don't know how else to explain it. But they still believe in all the miracles. It's like more contemporarized. So in Kenya, there's 38 million Christians. 56% of them are Pentecostal or charismatic.
Interesting.
And of the 50, I think that if I'm reading this right, 87% of them are Pentecostal, 78% of charismatics, and 47% of the other people. That's almost covers everybody. They all experience some kind of healing. or witnessed it,
And do
like direct witness.
do you think that's like a chain reaction? Is that like one person experiences healing and then they tell their friends and then they experience healing and so on and so forth? Whereas I feel like because it's not as prevalent in North America, there's probably a lower percentage of charismatics.
America has it's the fastest growing denomination in the world.
Oh, really?
Yes.
In America?
Everywhere in the world.
Mm.
Because you can't have church without belief in God's power.
Mm-hmm.
So all the churches that are like declining are non-charismatic.
Mm.
So they try to be like the idea of like social justice and like love each other and good teaching and how to make friends in the workplace and all that is like you can get those you can get that from chapters.
What
You can get that from Indigo.
what denominations are those? Those are Baptist.
Those are like no, this charismatic transcends all denominations. So you can be a Baptist charismatic.
I see. Interesting.
I'm ordained Presbyterian, but I'm a charismatic Presbyterian. Maybe I'm not even sure if I'm Presbyterian yet anymore. But you could be a charismatic Catholic. You can be a charismatic Episcopalian. But it just happens that most people who are like Bible believing and believe in the power of God has roots in Pentecostalism, and then there's some abuses in the Pentecostal denomination, and they became charismatics. They just want to label themselves charisma, which is charis, which is grace, and God's like giftings. So you just believe in God's giftings, and you can be. It's just a little hard if you're in a mainline denomination and you were trained under or discipled under a pastor that is anti-charismatic or does not believe in the gifts. Then you're probably going to not see anything.
So plainly speaking, is being charismatic more just like, oh, I believe that I have gifts from God and I'm going to use them?
Charismatic just means that God has given us like the Holy Spirit who has power to invade darkness. And darkness comes with it all kinds of baggage. Demonic oppression. Evil spirits. Sickness. It all comes with it. So we live in a fallen, broken world. And Jesus came to bring light into the world. And that's not just like a ethereal kind of good sentimental idea. It actually is spiritual forces of light coming against darkness. So when that comes, then darkness has driven away. When that darkness drives away, then you see evidence of that darkness being driven away through deliverance, through healing, through miracles, through like divine intervention. That's just the message of Jesus. He came to divinely intervene on our behalf. And the people who don't believe in these things are they're dwindling by the day. It's like VHS cassette tape. They're going to be obsolete but they're the loudest speakers. They're like scare you to death. Oh, if you believe in gifts, you're like borderline heresy but there are just so many reputable, respected scholars out there like N.T. Wright and I think Raymond Brown, if I'm getting correct. Like there's a lot of respected Wayne Grudem. They believe in gifts, but they're also traditional. There's nobody out there who doesn't believe in the gifts. Like, I think you believe in spiritual gifts, right? But I think you believed in that. You believed in miracles before you came to church.
Yeah.
You did, right?
Yeah.
But when you came to church, you didn't realize it's the essential message of Jesus. Maybe you don't even realize that now. Like, that is the difference. So it's not an option, but it has to be the essential message. I think I'm starting to really, even myself getting convicted, like, am I making that the central message? Because if we're going to see God demonstrate his work on the earth, like, we got to make sure that this is not an option. This is not something we do on the side. has to be essential. And there's a lot of people unnecessarily suffering because we don't pray for them with faith.
Mm.
Yeah, and there's many testimonies in this book too, where people are like, if you don't have faith, like there's some pastors in South America, like they can sense that people don't have faith, and then he'll just be like, I would just rather pray by myself. You guys are bringing down the faith level here.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, I don't know. I've been reading a lot on this, and I'm getting more and more convicted.
So, I mean, part of, I guess, one of the missions of Rain City is to bring heaven onto earth in Vancouver.
Mm-hmm.
I think, so how do you think about, now that you have this, I guess, revelation, integrating that into the mission? Like, what changes? Like, what does that look like?
I think we have to first believe it.
Mm.
So it's like, believe that it's accessible and it's for us, and it's way more. It's not like you push a button and then automatically it's going to happen.
Mm.
And there's so many things we don't know yet of how the practice of healing. Like, we don't know. Or people like there's people who are unduly oppressed, but they have no idea. Mind you, there's chemical imbalances in the brain, but I believe that demons like exacerbate that, and they torment people even more. Like, people are suffering, and people are needing deliverance. People made pacts with the enemy unwittingly. They made agreements. They believe in lies, and they're just inviting the enemy into their life. They're suffering. People are sick. And then we just made a theology of suffering and saying that God like gave that to you to teach you a lesson or something. That is like, for me, that's evil. I think God, in His mystery, like doesn't heal whenever we want, but it is His desire. There's some grand plan, and we have to trust Him. And ultimately, we're healed even if we die, because we're going to be in a resurrected body. But then there's a mission that is clear, like Jesus gave to the apostles, and then we don't carry it out. And we see what is happening in Acts, and we don't carry it out. Like, that's the first church. So I just think that people don't know the ramifications of not praying. I think you're causing undue harm. You know what I mean? Like, I think people are, because they could have been healed. And the idea, like, well, I don't know, the idea, like, if it was going to happen, it's going to happen, like, about sovereignty. But then I don't really ascribe to that theology as much.
Yeah. And I know briefly we're going to discuss like discipleship and how being a good disciple is different from being just a follower or a believer, because anyone can believe and then they'll go to heaven, be saved, but when you're a disciple, you are trying to bring heaven down into earth and not just waiting to go to heaven per se. And I guess it's hard to grasp for people because there isn't necessarily quote unquote reward on earth, but that isn't to say there is in heaven, right? And so I think when people can't see something tangible in front of them, they're like, oh, okay, well, the outcome seems the same to me here, so I'm just going to sit back and coast. Whereas what you're saying is, no, actually we should be praying more. We should be, I think the verse was Matthew 28:16.
Go and make disciples of all nations.
Yeah. So go out in the world and make disciples, multiply the disciples. So I guess, why do you think people don't do it, and what is the mindset to change that?
I think there's this theologian, his name is Walter Wink. He was also a member of the Jesus Seminar that tried to disproved the Gospels. It kind of eliminated a lot of the Gospels and said this is not in there, and just kind of wrote off a lot of the words. So we don't like the Jesus Seminar. But he actually wrote, he had anti-supernaturalistic assumptions. It says assumptions. Until he saw a large uterine tumor disappearing, apparently immediate after prayer. Then he changed his mind. So now he's no longer anti-supernaturalist, and this is. And he says, now I have no difficulty believing that Jesus actually healed people, and not just psychosomatic diseases. And then he writes this quote: "People with an attenuated sense of what is possible will bring that conviction to the Bible and diminish it by the poverty of their own experience."
Wow.
Yeah, read it again. People with an attenuated sense of what is possible will bring that conviction to the Bible and diminish it by the poverty of their experience. I think what he's saying is, like, it's the way we read the Bible, it's the way we hear the messages. It's, you already have a preconceived disposition to not believe, to doubt. I think your education system in our secular humanistic world and this anti-naturalistic, anti-supernatural mindset, you're like, your eyes are blind, you're already biased. Right? I don't know if you know the philosopher David Hume.
No.
Yeah, I'm not going to go into it. He was one of the hardest, just circular arguments. I said, I hate philosophy, just going back and forth. And basically his whole premise was like, you only know what you see. It's like there's no intervention, there's nothing beyond this. It's just, and we get a lot of philosophers like that, and just Enlightenment philosophy, where we believe like in science is like become our God. Now, I believe in science, but I don't make it my God, because God is God. And it's like that guy with the brain tumor, inoperable, incurable. I'm not saying that every person in that situation will get healed, but if he believed in science and science is God, he would have just gave up, because he's a scientist. He's a neuroscientist. So he said, I already know my prognosis, just because I know what it means to have this. But imagine if he didn't believe in God, and he went to all these places around the world for a year to get prayer for his brain tumor, and now he's eight years in, still looking pretty good, writing papers. And I don't know. Like, are you gonna bet your life on that? Is that the way you want to live? Like, if something happens to you, you're gonna be like, I'm just gonna trust the Lord, and whatever happens, happens? Or are you gonna go out like, no, I'm gonna do everything in my power, because I believe in the kingdom, and I believe God is good, and by his stripes I am healed, and this is what's an essential message, and let my life be a message, and I'm gonna just keep praying, getting every single person to pray for me until I'm healed. And if not, I'm ultimately healed. Like, it's like that idea of like, I'm just gonna go down fighting. I'm not gonna, you know what I mean? But also, like, you want to share the message of Jesus. This is like, you want to give him glory. You want to glorify him. I think we can give God glory when we suffer, and then we still worship him. But then he also gets glory when he works his wonders, and people wonder, and people are pointed to him. Most of the churches in South America, Asia, and Africa, they grow because someone got healed. In the village or in the neighborhood, someone they all know. They were deaf, and he's no longer deaf, so everybody goes to that church. I think that is something we need to really think about in North America, because I really don't want to do church any other way. It's just kind of really boring, and secondly, it's not the gospel, I don't believe.
I think it's really hard, and I haven't really seen too many people in North America that go all in. And I think it's interesting that well, specifically in the U.S., there is this rapid growth because I feel like it built into their culture. They're much more, they've got that fighter spirit. I feel like Canadians are pretty laid back. Like, oh, everything's good. Like, could be better, but could be worse. And that almost like acceptance of like, oh, okay, this is how my life is. Then there isn't a lot of like movement, because I really like the quote that you said earlier, where you're affected by the poverty of your experiences. And just alone in that, saying you're poor because you haven't experienced it, but you're not going to experience it by doing nothing.
Yeah.
And ironically, I think because there isn't as much of a quote unquote need, because in North America, a lot of the things are more spiritual, right? Because if you, I don't know, roll your ankle or you have a bad cough, you're just either taking some medicine or you're going straight to the hospital and you're like, oh, like, you know, the healthcare system will take care of me. So there isn't that much of a need. Whereas like if you go into these, I guess, third world countries, people, they have to walk 3 hours to go to the hospital. So praying just, I guess, makes more sense in that sense.
Well, I mean, there's definitely the need, and they need to alleviate their suffering. But it doesn't mean that God is like saying, okay, you have a hospital now, I'm not going to do anything. Like, so it's both. But I don't know how to put it. Like, you have a bike. Let's say there was potentially there's like a teletransportation system, right? Like, I think Elon Musk is trying to create a tunnel where you just go through underneath the LA and you can get somewhere.
Yeah.
I heard that a few years ago. And then you have a regular car, and there's people with no cars. So if somehow through your asking or like persistence, you can get through that tunnel, like, you will go, because you know that it's accessible, potentially. But if you had a car and then their lineup was like, you had to wait, it was potentially like you're calculating, well, it's 2 hours waiting in line and then I can get to Pasadena in 5 minutes. Well, it's going to take me 2 hours to Pasadena, I'll just stay in the car. Like, if it's the same result, then you're going to just take your car. And then people who have no car, or they don't have a car, they don't want to walk, so they're just going to line up on the fast speed train. So that doesn't mean that just because you have a car that you don't have that access. It just means that you think that car will give you the same outcome as the super speed underground railway or something. You just think that it's going to get the same outcome. But what I propose is that when you drive the car, you drove it, and no one gets the glory except you. But if you went into that tunnel and you get there so fast, you could potentially like bypass a lot. You can relax. You can just sit there, and quickly you can like bypass all the driving and traffic and all the medical interventions. You can just get there like super speed. For me, I'm not trying to say I'm not going to like try to apply medicine in my life, but while at the same time, I'm going to ask for both. Whatever is the fastest and most expedient, Lord, I also have access to this. And if there's like there's no car and I have no other choice, I'm going to just keep pressing until I can get into that. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think people don't think that they have that access just because they have a car or they have like medicine. I can just go to hospital, and not realizing that it's not just about you, it's about the testimony that you're going to bring by God, like working something in you. I think that's probably why people just, because it says here I think in 2006 or something, a Pew survey, 86% of people in America believed in miracles or something.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I think most people believe. It says, here, 1989 Gallup poll, so that's way back, but I'm sure it's the same. 82% of people in the United States believe in miracles, with only 6% saying there's like absolutely no way it'll never happen. Another poll in 1995 reports that two-thirds, that's 75% of the United States, are affirming miracles. Right? And churches that emphasize these things are the fastest growing in Christianity.
So I guess what that looks like
Yeah.
is if you have some sort of injury or illness, you can drive to the hospital, but then on the way there, you're also like praying like, hey, God, can you heal me? And maybe by the time you get to the hospital, you're healed.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of testimonies of people who did that. Like there's I think an African Anglican priest I just read about today that like had a heart disease. He was 90% of his heart was like blocked, and he should have died. But he still had ministry.
Oh wow!
He was just doing some ministry, and then they finally flew him to London and to get the bypass surgery, and people were praying for him, and then they found that most of his heart was unclogged.
Wow! On the plane.
On the way, people are praying for him. So
wow.
There's hundreds. I can't go into every detail, but it's just staggering. I've been really blessed reading these testimonies, because sometimes we just forget. We just don't realize the ramifications and the magnitude. Like anything can happen. Like I just don't. We're talking about hundreds of millions of testimonies, and not everything is legit, because people tend to exaggerate. But are you saying all 100 million are exaggerated? So basically, if we just take half, that's like 50 million testimonies of people getting healed. That's a lot, don't you think?
Yeah, and I was seeing this YouTube video of this pastor in Texas, and I liked his. It's similar to yours, but his just was much more, I guess, grounded in modern day lifestyle, where he has access to, because he's from Texas, so he has access to the Dallas Cowboys and the Dallas Mavericks, so an NFL and NBA team, because he's their, I don't know what you call it, chaplain?
Yeah, he's the chaplain.
And so essentially he just gets free access to their games, free access to parking, like a special parking lot. He's like, well, if somebody comes to watch the game with me, they get free access with me to go into the behind the scenes. I don't have to deal with the crowd. You don't have the headaches of parking. And by the time the game finishes, you also will, be home in half the time, as opposed to people who bought tickets and go into the regular seats because they're with him. And so it's like that same analogy with Jesus. Like everything is just much easier, and you don't have to work that hard. But I guess the interesting conflict is that some people, and I think that's human nature, want to do it themselves. It's like that struggle is like, oh, like because I did this myself in my own power.
Well, praying for yourself is not you doing it, it's God doing it. But asking for help takes a lot. People don't want to put themselves out there unless they're really serious. But I think it seems apparent to me, just through practice, there's something about laying on of hands. Something about somebody praying for you. Something about somebody else, like other people praying on your behalf. Because I think God is excited, not excited, but is heartened when like it's a communal affair, and God works when two or more are gathered in great power, it says. So there I am with them. It doesn't mean that God's not with us, but when there's like a collective like faith, something happens, I think. And I think sometimes we think we need like a lot of faith, but I think sometimes you just have to pray and just believe. There was a disabled minister in Malawi, Africa, unable to walk, asked for a prayer for healing from a British Anglican named Michael Green. So he was a senior research fellow at Wycliffe Hall, Oxford. He was reluctant but unable to avoid the challenge because he came up to him, so Green prayed for him, and the man got up and started dancing around. Just as in Acts, Lystra, the cripple, was dancing around, as recorded doing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so we're talking about people who are like not even, they don't even believe. They believe, but they're not like, oh, I've never seen that happen. I don't know if that's going to work. Right? So I think you just got to put yourself out there and just kind of, I would like to see Rain City collectively believe. I just wonder what would happen. How much we'll see. And how much can we see? We don't know what we can see. There are a lot of people suffering. Like, I don't know. A lot of people suffering and scared and worried, and like they would like to have somebody pray for them. It's just soothing and healing. Like somebody, and believing that God can heal is like hopeful. Like, I think the game's over when you're like, there's no hope for me. And I think you're on a fast track to like decay. But if there's hope for you, it's like the Jewish survivors in Holocaust. The people who survived, people had hope. They believed something good was going to happen. People who didn't survive, they lost hope. They thought, this is it. We're going to die. And I think it's like that with disease or sickness. It's just when you lose hope, that's it. Like, you got to fight. That's what I mean. Fight a good fight of hope and faith. Just believe that God is good, and forget about what's not going to happen. Forget about what will happen, and just believe. And then leave the outcome to the Lord. But just trust in like centuries of healing. We're talking about not just, this is recent time, but we haven't even counted like the early church. The patristic fathers, which is like the fathers who got discipled by the apostles. There's numerous accounts of healing. With all the accounts of healing, there are people who used to get healed during communion. Like when you're taking communion, people would get healed, and when the priest would come and anoint them, there's chances that they might like rise out of their deathbed. This is like, it just happened that once we hit the scientific enlightenment in North America, the Western Christianity, all that went to the toilet. And then people started getting educated into anti-supernatural philosophies, and we started reading books, and they just got way too smart for their own good. And it's actually an insult to the whole world. Because according to Keener and some other statistics, by 2050, white Christians, like the Western white typical Christian, will be 20% of all Christianity.
Wow.
80% will be Asian, South American, African. So
taking over.
Yeah, I'm like, it's height of arrogance to say all those 80% are like uneducated. They're superstitious. It really defies logic, because we're talking about people who are educated, who are doctors, who are philosophers, who are theologians in these countries, and you're saying that they're not smart, quote unquote, or they're super. They don't even think of it that way. They just think as normative. This is the way, because they haven't been brainwashed by this anti-supernatural philosophy. So I think you got to get on the train, or you're just going to be by the wayside. You're going to have nobody. You're an island by yourself. That's the way I think.
So I guess bringing it back to Rain City, what is one small thing that you think people can do?
I think first of all, when I don't know, I'm hesitant to even talk about this, because sometimes when I talk about it, people's eyes just kind of go glazed because they're like, I already know it can happen, but I don't think they know.
Well, it's because they're poor. They're poor from experience.
Yeah, they're poor of experience. It's just like I actually think it's demonic. It's just that their like eyes are just glazed.
Wow.
They don't even believe. Because once their eyes are open and they start to really believe, like potential comes in.
Mm.
And when potential comes in, then you'll like want to invest into that,
Mm.
right? It's like a good stock. Somebody opens your eyes to a good stock, it's gonna go like 100 times, and you actually believe. It's not like, oh, you're just,
Yeah.
you actually believe it. You've done your research, and then you're like, oh yeah. Then you invest into it, and then you get excited,
Mm.
and you keep looking at your stock, right? So people don't invest into it. They just kind of, yeah, I think it can happen. But that's not. That's like you're saying, well, once in a while, God will do something, or like, whoa, that's cool. But I'm talking about the prevalence. That's faith. Faith means that it's going to happen way more than you think, and God is like chomping at the bits to do that. But it's just in His sovereignty, He has created a system where He wants like faith and partnership. I don't know. That's the mystery of God. So I just believe hopefully people will start to really believe, but to really believe, like, I don't know, for me, I'm reading this book. There's a shorter book. He condensed it. I'm reading this 1,100 page book. But I read, like, I think I was reading like 3 hours of it today. Just like filling my mind with like, oh my gosh, there's so much out there. I don't know.
Okay,
and
so
then I get excited, and then I start praying, and then it's just filling my mind with potential and possibilities. And like, I already believe biblically this is true, but sometimes I think even for myself, do I really believe it? If I did, I would practice it more. I would just want to pray for everybody who's sick, because never know. Like, I don't know, why not? Like, I do pray for people who are sick, but I think my faith is like, my faith level goes higher because I know the potential now. Like, I never realized, holy cow, I also get competitive and jealous. I shouldn't say
competitive prayer.
No, it's the idea, like, why is the whole world experiencing things and I'm not? Why are Africans, are they more special than me? Like, why do they have all these testimonies? You know, when I went to Africa, like like the woman who was serving us food she kept giving me this piece of paper, and she wanted to testify. I didn't know what the piece of paper was, and the guy who read it and said, "This is a medical report." She says she's free from AIDS.
Wow.
So she didn't have HIV; she had AIDS. And she said, "Look, I have no more AIDS."
Wow.
And then my other pastor friends were just eating like it's normal. I was freaking out. But they're eating like this is normative. This is what happens quite often, a lot of times, because they're so used to it. Do you know what I'm saying?
Like the pastors in Africa are so used to it.
Yeah, we're all eating lunch. I was having lunch with the pastors, and they're like, "Yeah,
just another one, brother.
Just another one, brother." Why are you? We also have raising the dead. You know, they're like, and my other friend Simon Caressa in Kenya, he oversees about 1,100 churches over there. He has a crazy amount of testimonies, and I like him because he's very trustworthy. Especially if I give him money for something, he's like, buy the book, every penny. There was a woman who was pregnant, and then the stomach got really hard, the uterus, and then the doctor said the baby's like dead inside.
Wow.
So they just prayed. No heartbeat. Time to birth. They birthed. Baby's perfectly fine. And he was holding the baby. He said, "Here's a picture of me and the baby, brother." He showed me on his phone. This is the baby. I'm like for me, it's like hard to compute.
Yeah.
Like, I don't really understand.
Yeah.
But it is Bible. It is the Bible. You can call it resuscitation or raising the dead. We're not going to be resurrected like Jesus in a glorified body. That's never going to happen until we die.
Yeah.
But it is something. It is like Lazarus.
Yeah.
Raising the dead, right? Resuscitating, or they were dead for a while and they come back to life. Like these are all signs,
Mm.
and I think we just don't have the framework,
Mm.
and I think that's why we don't see a lot in North America. Just don't have the framework to be able to like say that can happen.
Mm.
It's not could happen. God wants a lot of those things to happen, so let's go for it.
Mm.
I think if you don't believe, it's never going to happen. Assenting is not believing. Just saying, "Oh yeah, that could happen," is not believing.
Mm.
That's not faith. Faith is like, oh, it's gonna happen.
Mm.
It'll happen more than you think. I'm gonna keep praying for it until it happens. So, because look at this other a missiologist and a professor, I think, was. She said, "Are miracles possible?" She's from Korea. Wow, Young. Are miracles possible? This, of course, addresses the enlightenment problem of a closed universe. In much of Asia, that is a non-question because the miraculous is assumed and fairly regularly experienced. So, I don't know. Edmund Tong from China, he says, another missiologist, all Christian churches in China practice some form of healing, including the government churches. In fact, according to some surveys, 90% of new believers cite healing as a reason for their conversion. This is especially true in the countryside where medical facilities are often inadequate or non-existent.
So the moral of the story is we got to pray more and more often for more people.
I think not just praying more, it's just like you got to keep doing it, obviously. But you got to believe. And I think believing comes through like hearing. Faith comes through hearing and like testimonies. And I like these testimonies in this book because it's written by a theologian and also J.P. Moreland, who's one of the most respected theologians and philosophers of our time, J.P. Moreland. And he just wrote another book about the miraculous, and he believes is more, and he believes in like this is how you pray for healing, practice of healing, and the miraculous, because he believes it's an essential nature of God's kingdom. So we're not talking about just like Pentecostal charismatic like Benny Hinn or like people who are out there doing revival rallies and like Reinhard Bonnke. I mean, Reinhard Bonnke in Africa had the greatest healings of all time. So many, but
he's the GOAT.
Yeah, he's the greatest of all time. He passed away, but he's handed it off to David Kalenda. So this guy, this theologian went to David Kalenda's and talks to him quite often, talk about their eyewitness accounts. But you got all these people out there, like now the scholars and people who are doing research are trying to put it in publications. It's hard because a lot of it is post healing, right? So just like you have to look at the medical record before and after. But science is like, well, we need proof. But I think for me, it's like if you were sick and then you're not sick, and then all your friends are saying, yeah, that person was deaf, but they're not deaf, and you measure their deafness, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
I think that's good enough evidence for me. Like, I don't need to go into the ear and examine if it's like actually changed. No, I just know that they couldn't hear, but they can hear. By auditory machine. They've actually gone down. So, I don't know. That's what's been on my heart lately.
So the proof is in the pudding, and we need to pray for the proof.
I don't know what that means, proof of the proof. What are you talking about?
Isn't that a saying? The proof is in the pudding. It's like, just kind of eat it. Like it'll be good, sort of feeling. But so I guess any last words for those listening? Big takeaway. Obviously, we know that we should be praying more so that we're pulling ourselves out of poverty from these experiences. But yeah, any parting words?
I think that God is our healer and He is a miracle worker. I don't know. This is not a. Every time I say things like this, people are like, "Oh, you're threatening the church or something." I'm not threatening the church in any way. For me, I just feel like I have a set purpose and set goal, and I don't want to do another church in Vancouver. There's plenty of churches out there, and you know what? Most of them are going to go to heaven. It's like confess the Lord, believe in your heart and confess Him as Lord, and you believe that He resurrected from the dead, He's the Messiah, the Savior, the Son of God. You're going to heaven, man. Sincerely believe that, you're going to heaven. And you live your life based on that premise, you're going to go to heaven. But, so there's many churches. If you're interested in just going to heaven, there's many churches out there, and you can form a community and have a little enclave and learn good Bible teachings and principles of life, and all those things are good. Like I do that sometimes too, and, like sometimes I bring in a little bit about like getting married and dating and all that. But those are like side dishes. It's like a little dressing. But for me, the main meat is like, if the kingdom of God, the Gospels are so clear to me. The more I meditate on Mark, I've been doing Mark for 4 months now. I'm only on chapter 7.
Oh my gosh.
And the more I meditate and I think about it, I've never taken this long to do Mark. But and like the message is so clear. Like 31% mention healings, and 40% of Jesus' narratives are about healing and deliverance and confronting the powers of religious systems, of darkness, spiritual systems. It's like very confrontational. So for me, either people are going to believe or they don't believe. Either we're going to see things or we don't see things. And I think that's, if people have to get on board with that. It has to be essential. Like I can't emphasize it enough. Like it paves the way for the gospel. It paves the way, like prophecy, healing, signs and wonders, angelic visitations, God speaking to you, the word coming alive. You can see acts in your real world. You're praying for your coworkers. Things are happening. People are suffering there. It's like God's given you the opportunity to be the instrument of God, bring the kingdom to them. And I think that's how our church is going to grow. And I don't want to grow any other way. So this is not an ultimatum. It's just a time factor. It's just a matter of fact. It's the fact. It's the fact factor. It's just facts.
Fact factor.
I'm just not going to waste my time. I love you guys and I love everybody, but I'm just not going to waste my time on the things that are not as essential. I'm going to just keep pressing on.
So I guess if you're listening and you want to go to heaven, then that's great. But if you want to bring heaven to people, then this is the place to be.
Man, you got all these little sayings.
That's
it.
We got to copyright it. But that's a wrap for today. And if you like this episode, then please share it with a friend. It might just be the reason why they come to church. So with that, we'll leave you to it. Peace.